All right. Good day, everybody. And welcome to our LinkedIn live session on recruitment and big data. My name is Keijzer, and I'm the CEO of the Talent Games, a company whose purpose it is to bring science and fun to the art of recruitment. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that these are extraordinary times. The world, as we know it, has changed beyond recognition, and many of us have been impacted. Of course, our thoughts go out to people that have been infected, and similarly to people who have been impacted economically or socially. I do know that the current situation is first and foremost on our minds, and I do sincerely hope that you and your loved ones are safe. However, this LinkedIn session is not going to be about the coronavirus. Nadeem and I are no experts, and our intent is to take your mind a little bit off the current situation and give you an opportunity to exchange views and hopefully learn a few things on recruitment and big data. But of course, stay safe and play your role to flatten the curve. Having said that, let me introduce you to my guest for today. Nadeem Khan is the author of Introduction to People Analytics and contributor to the People Management magazine. He's the managing director of Optimize HR, a futuristic company that provides data and people analytics solution to amplify and align organizational strategy. Nadeem and I spoke to each other a couple of months ago, and I was really excited and impressed with his knowledge around the data analytics piece specifically for HR. Nadeem, although he's based in England, has of course his roots in Pakistan. So I'm a European in Pakistan. He's a Pakistani in England. But I think it's a wonderful combination. It shows how diverse the world is. So Nadeem, I'm very pleased to have you with us. Tell me a bit about yourself and that upcoming book, Introduction to People Analytics.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. It is certainly an honor. So about myself. So I've been in the UK for almost 4 years now. I was born in Pakistan, raised partly in UK, then traveled back to Pakistan. Lived almost half my life here, half my life there, and then I certainly came here to do a postgraduate where I decided to stay back and write the book. I've been fortunate to speak on global platforms, people analytics platforms, and learned from I would say the best there are in the UK. So in one of the platforms last year where I was speaking, I met a thought leader whose name is Dave Milner, and we had a brief chat conversation on how we can basically this conundrum around people in workforce analytics, which I had studied, which obviously in academia is called human capital. And the reason why it's called human capital is because you can measure the value that that the intangibles bring towards the business. That was the area that we studied. And then we kind of, all the organizations that we met, we wanted to take case studies from how the people function is changing, how recruitment is changing, how automation is coming in, and all these things around the future of work and big data, and I would say people data. So that's all that is around the book, and it's basically an introduction for those people in HR that want to learn that space, that want to understand the space from the ABCs. I had an academic more or less and consulting background. Dave had 30 years of experience, and we put that together in a book. And fortunately, we had one of the thought leaders that's written the foreword, Bernard Marr. So we've kind of, we've got the cherry on top, and we've got great, I would say great expectations from the book, and a good review from everyone that we've shared the book with. So that's about it. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic, man! Fantastic. And I've tried a couple of times to write a book myself. I know how awfully difficult it is, and I've actually given up on it. So chapeau to you for being able to finish that. I think the book is still to be published. It's still to be published, correct? Is it going to be?
No. It's out. You can order it from Kogan Page. It's online. It's printed. Unfortunately, I haven't received it because of the coronavirus and a lot of the things that are happening. But Dave, because he lives very close to London, so he's received a copy of the book. And I would, the thing that you said, that it wasn't necessarily me that wrote the book. It was a combination of the efforts of a lot of people. I've just been fortunate to be, as a part of recruitment, the right person at the right time at the right place. So I think that's just being very fortunate to say that live right now. That it wasn't just me; it was a combination of a lot of people that I collaborated with, and this effort was. I was just a passionate person at the right place, and I think that's where our recruitment journey starts off from.
Oh, that's great! Great to hear, man. So very interesting. Let's dive right in. Let's get the basics right. So, what is big data, and why is it important for HR?
Okay, so to understand big data, I'm going to be as simple as possible. Okay, so every device that we use, our mobile phones to LinkedIn, to anything that is digital that you're using, whether it's you're watching a streaming online, whether you have a smartwatch, everything today collects data, right? And there are I think 1 million zettabytes of data being collected as compared to 10 years ago. So it's become, if you see Gartner's research and other places, you would see that the data that is being collected has multiplied by I would say 1,000 folds. So what companies are now doing is they can tap into this data.
Okay. So how would they use it for HR? Help me here.
So previously, what used to happen was marketeers were the first to use this data. Financial analysts were and marketeers have been probably the first to use the data. But now a lot of the data is linked to people. And that's how our research came in, which we said it's not just HR, it's people data, because the data is coming from multiple sources. Those data can come from the operations, which is linked to people that are working off in the field. There can be health indicators related to that. When you're talking about recruitment, there can be instances when someone is filling up an application online. You run, I can give you an example of gamification that you already run. If someone has entered a gamification app, what is the strategy? What are the tactics they're using? You can pinpoint those data points back towards the personality of the individual, and link it back to culture, whether you hire that individual, whether the individual will obviously would become a high performer. These are all predictive analytics, but obviously this data combined with expert advice from people like yourself can be interesting and insightful for organizations. So this is just, I would say, if I were to reverse a gear and say, so if you're using your mobile, you have a health app, and that health app can predict how much you're walking and maybe even predict your health in the future. Similar to smartwatches, when the Fitbit came out, people were buying it because they wanted to wear it in the gym and help them access more about their health, which they couldn't do by going to the doctor every day. So that's where it all started from. But now companies and organizations are able to track that data back to the health of employees, or maybe even for recruitment purposes, as I said. And this data is basically exponential. So you need to pick up the right data and start from there. But even taking another step back, organizations just dive in. When we advise organizations, what we say to them is, you need to have a burning question, a business question, rather than saying, okay, so we're just going to look at the data. And I think that's again where experts like ourselves and yourself come in. Is what is the business question? What are you trying to answer? Do you want to create a high performance team? Do you want to create agile teams, or do you want to? What exactly is the business burning question that you need to answer? And then you look at the data rather than the reverse.
Yeah, it's a very interesting example. A good friend of mine is Henry Liu. He's a data scientist from MIT, and he's now working for Lazara, but he worked for an HR data consultancy, and they were working for a large bank in Singapore. And the big business question was around retention of people. And the question that was asked to Henry was, how can you predict on the basis of the data that we already have in our database around people, whether that's to do with demographics, whether that's to do who they report to, whether that's to do with their salary, when was their performance grade, when was the last bonus, etc., etc. All the data points that you already have in a database. The question was, can you find out a model and subsequently predict on that data which individual is most likely to resign over the next 6 months? And what they were able to do is they looked at all the different elements, and of course you then gonna correlate, looked at people that have left and what their data was, people that have stayed, what their data was, and try to make correlations. And what they were able to find is that all the different data points, there were about 10 or 15 elements that had an impact in terms of being able to predict whether a person was able to leave. And they were quite strange. So, for example, one was around how long have you been working with your boss? One was, do you have a male as a boss or a female as a supervisor? Third one was, how long ago was it that you had a salary increase? And 15 of similar type of data points. On that basis, at the end, with an accuracy of 85%, they could predict beforehand which person was going to leave 6 months from now. And obviously, if you're able to have that kind of ability, that you look at your workforce and you know that over the next 6 months, these kind of people are going to leave, and there are a number of individuals that you don't want them to leave, you can take proactive action in order to make sure that you retain them. And I thought that was so enormously powerful, and I think that's how we're going to look at predictive analytics for HR very, very soon.
Yes, that is a very good example for recruitment, using data for recruitment. Very, very true. Very true.
So any other in terms of have you seen companies using big data in recruitment? What is out there? What is happening at the moment in which that you've seen people using it?
I think what has happened very recently is, I think a couple of years ago when I started off, we were using Microsoft Excel. Then we started using, and I'm talking about, when I say we, I'm talking about more or less a lot of the companies. And in our research, we saw that a lot of companies started off with Microsoft Excel, and then they shifted to SPSS and then R and all these languages, Python, and they were trying to basically use that data to do regressive, to do analysis of that data, of the data set that they had. The problems that we have is with HR, we're not more or less the skill gap that we have. So a lot of now people are moving towards specialized companies that can help them, that basically are analytics or people analytics companies that are helping them now scope the data that they have and predict and analyze that data. So it kind of has less the time. So they might be going to before that they could do like use Power BI as a tool, but as you said, you need to have the commercial acumen, which we found in HR is a bit lagging at this point in time. So I think just with numbers, as the example that you gave, a lot of HR would not be able to understand what do these numbers basically tally back, or what do they say. So that is where these automated companies are coming in and helping HR to probably bridge the gap. So I wouldn't want to give an example of a particular probably software company at this point in time, but more or less what I'm trying to say is that people used to be using those, and now they're using now they're more or less transcending towards these software companies.
There's a lot of questions coming in, and I would like to encourage people to keep on listing them. Towards the end, I will pick them up. So don't hesitate to leave them down in LinkedIn at the moment. But before we move on, I'm just going to ask Nadeem, because there are different stages in terms of how you move to predictive analytics and people analytics. And then there's a famous graph from Gartner that shares that. Can I just ask? I'm going to share this on the screen. Can I just ask you to take us through that?
Yes.
Through that, Nadeem?
Yes.
Second, I think there you are. And hopefully everybody sees now this screen. So it's quite a journey from descriptive analytics to prescriptive analytics. Can you just help me understand what these stages mean?
Yes, I'll give you. We'll use a metric for an example, and we'll try to understand what basically that is entailing. So descriptive analytics is just basically if let's suppose from a recruitment perspective, if you have an application. You're tracking the application rate. At this point in time, you're providing, okay, so how many people have actually filled in the application, where you're saying, okay, so what is the completion rate of the application? An example would be, so what's happened? Have people filled in the application? Has it been filled in? Has it been completed? What's the ratio of the application? So the application completed rate, people who have submitted, and the total number of applications. That is just, giving it a descriptive analytics of what's happened. If we move to a diagnostic analysis, we'll say, okay, so how many people haven't filled in and what's the reason? So that's probably diagnosing. Maybe through diagnosis, you might know that the application is too long, it's too cumbersome for people to fill up. Maybe it's got something technical, maybe there's problems for people to upload. So you're trying to diagnose what that problem is. Predicting. Sorry.
No, I got it.
So from a descriptive is you're just describing what is happening. Diagnosing is to diagnose why a problem has happened, and if that continues, HR or recruitment will say, okay, so if this continues, what will likely to happen? So a lot of resources. You're going to look at the cost of recruitment. A lot of resources will be wasted. A lot of time will be wasted. The efforts of the HR to probably the whole recruitment drive would be wasted. There can also be a diagnosis. We are looking at a concept known as employer branding. If there is a problem with that, the websites that you have that launched the recruitment drive in. Whether that recruitment drive is working, the whole and predicting what will happen if this continues. And I think the last where a lot of companies are struggling would be prescriptive analytics. Is how can we make it happen? An example would be, so from descriptive, where exactly do you want to go in recruitment? And how many applications would you like, and what backgrounds of people would you like to fill? So that's prescriptive analytics. Even before the application has been filled in and before it's been designed, what exactly are you looking? How can you make the future possible? So it's basically having a foresight and to where you are today.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Can I just go back, because I think that a lot of recruiters this prescriptive analytics is probably that's a long way out. The one thing that I've even noticed, that even on the descriptive analytics, there's still a lot of people who are actually not doing it. And just a question to all recruiters looking: how many of you actually do have a recruitment scorecard that you look for, and with a number of metrics? I love this scorecard, and I just try to share my screen here for a second. I love this scorecard that I found from a specific company. in which I hope this is visible. Yeah, in which different recruiters are being measured, not only on their conversion rate, also on the cost per hire. How long does it take to hire? And one element that I think is very important in getting to recruitment data is, of course, your candidate net promoter score. What is your candidate gonna be a positive advocate of your company based on the experience that they have? So I think the first step in terms of using big data for recruitment is to first start measuring, correct? Start collecting the data and start measuring. So I think that would be my first heartfelt message to all the recruiters that are watching, is how can you make sure is that first of all you start collecting the data, and then subsequently you start measuring in order for you to assess your own performance and to share that with the rest of the organization. Because if you notice that the time to hire or your conversion rate or your success ratio, the quality of hires, the success ratio is basically what is the percentage of candidates that you've hired who after 12 months had a good or better performance grading. Yeah, if that ratio is very low because a lot of people have left or you didn't recruit the right quality, you immediately can start taking action on that basis. Of course, that is after event has happened, and therefore it's called descriptive analysis. But it is a first step, correct?
Yes, I think the first what I basically, when I talk to companies, I inform them it is very important. It is like a yardstick, and like any game or like any health indicator, it is where you stand today. It's like standing on when you wake up in the morning and you want to stand up on the weighing machine. That would give you one indicator of, okay, so what your health or what your a lot of people calculate the BMI. What is your weight today, and do you want to decrease it? Do you want to increase it? So that's predicting, okay, so if I eat this, what will happen? I might get fat, I might get slim. And obviously these are general, this is just a very general example, but this can be applied to a lot of complex tasks where you might say, okay, so do I want to improve my performance? And then you work backwards towards where your futuristic goal is. That is the strategy, and that's what HR usually struggles with. When you have strategic indicators, you need to understand and align them to the business strategy, and that's where your strategic workforce planning comes in. So where you are today, where your performance is today, have a holistic perspective of it. And as you said, if you're hiring someone, it might take 3 to 6 months for them to accustom themselves to the culture and then their performance to be as good as you want it to be. So you need to be tracking them from day one for you to be able to know where they were and where they are and where they need to be. If you're not tracking them, by tracking I don't mean to be tracking their every move, but we haven't actually talked about key performance indicators. I think this is the right place to probably talk about that. Is you need to have the right key performance indicators when you're building key performance indicators, whether it's around recruitment or performance. You would be able to track the progress of today, tomorrow, and the future, and that would entail you to tell the management of, okay, so this is how this links back to the financial indicators of the company, and whether the performance is going up, and the bottom line as well in that.
Yeah, so that's why these recruitment matrices are so important, because if what you achieve what you measure. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
Recruitment by itself, of course, is analytics, correct? It looks at past experience, skills, competency, personality, cognitive ability, and on that basis, you predict how the person might respond and perform in a specific position. The problem, of course, is that the tools that we use, interviews, assessments, and other tests, don't have a very high predictive accuracy. And we all know that selecting on the basis of 1 or 2 unstructured interviews only has a success rate of about 20% in terms of predicting performance. So the key is, of course, how you design your selection process to increase the predictability of success. And I think there's 2 stages to do that, just as a specifically around recruitment. The first one is you have to collect the relevant data, and secondly, you have to have lots of it, because if you just have 5 data points, then of course you can derive any conclusion out of it. So big data is all about get as many data points. If you allow me, a couple of months ago, we did a data science study on a graduate recruitment program for a bank that has used our recruitment game last March. And there were about 7,000 people that have played the game. And then subsequently what we did is we followed through how the people that have played the game were moving through the next recruitment rounds until they were given an offer for that organization. So there were 4 or 5 different rounds that they were using. And what we did was we looked at the profile of the people that have played the game and their scores and their other data, and then specifically compared it on how they progressed. And as a result, by looking at that, our data scientist has now been able to create a model that just on the basis of the game score, we can now predict with a 70% accuracy which person will get an offer and which person doesn't get an offer. And I'm not advocating that you take the steps in the middle away, but it's almost, if you do that a couple of years and you get that confidence higher to 80 or 85%, then it almost means that on the basis of how people play a recruitment game in this example, and the data that are associated with it, that with an 85% accuracy, you can actually predict whether that person is a right fit in a company. And I think that is where we're gonna go. That's where we're gonna go in terms of really pushing forward in terms of using data for taking recruitment decisions. Any example that you have seen, Nadeem?
I think what is happening in UK especially. So we have 2 examples. One are companies that have the resources to use such data, specifically with automation and recruitment, as similar to what you've given. But on the other hand, we also have, because we recently had a data breach, which a lot of people might know about, a couple of years back. But what has happened is that the UK or European Union has strict their laws on collecting data. So we have to be very, very cautious before we're even collecting data, what type of data is required. From our perspective, obviously, there are different countries of what you can do, what you can't do. So for that particular reason, you need to understand and inform the employees which type of data you're collecting. I can give you a very simple example. We were looking at the data for Brompton Bikes. This is a car manufacturer in the UK, and we're just looking at the performance data of how many bikes are being manufactured. So every day they were basically solding the bikes. So the number of bike frames that were being manufactured for a day was 5. So from that example, what we derived was that if someone is working on the plant to manufacture a bike, how their performance is being measured. So the KPI for that was let's say 5 bikes in that instance. If they're not being able to manufacture 5 bikes, what is the reason? And it's not basically the culture was built on we've given this example in the book. The culture was basically built on being more data driven, but they weren't pushed to make 6 or 7 frames. and neither were they pushed to make 5 frames. It was just because the KPI was 5. They could have, with years of experience, they learned that within the amount of time that they had, they could build that many frames. So creating that culture and not even having cameras that were recording it. So it's not part of what type of data is collected and how bigger the data is collected. Even if the data is small, you need to know the precise of why and what the data is collected. So there are companies which are collecting less data, but what's the insight that the data can give? And in this case, it's basically descriptive analytics. But then if they have an order, they can from, let's say, China or other places which they export every year, they would know how many bikes we need to be manufacturing and how much we need to, what the performance of people are. If, let's say, they're getting burnout, they would be manufacturing less bikes. Or if there is a health problem or a health hazard, they can look into that particular indicator, and that one indicator shows them across the whole organization. This is just an example of operations where you can then track back to, okay, so how many bikes are being manufactured, what does the health look like of people in the plant, and other things related to that KPI, which is very simple.
Yeah. Thanks. And specifically, I think the point where you started in terms of data privacy and GDPR and transparency around data collection is very, very important. Yeah, so also,
I think one other thing that came to my mind around recruitment is because we were interviewing we interviewed the CEO, and we also looked at the head of business development. What they're now trying to do is they're trying to get people who are more data savvy, data driven, and they basically know why the data is being collected, for what purpose. So if you know the purpose, it's not to basically push you to make more frames or make more bikes. It's just to know what your performance is and whether we're on track towards the prescriptive, towards the predictive analytics. Okay, this is how many number of frames. This is the order that we have, and this is what we need to manufacture. If someone's basically manufactured 4 today, there might be because of some reason. Maybe there might be a problem with their health. Maybe there might be a problem with the plant itself. Maybe there might be there might be a variety of problems, but then they're also having supervisors that can use the data and that can inform using that particular data. So it's important not just to collect lots of data from one perspective. If you do have, let's say, a software company or a specialist company that can help you, but other places you may be starting small and then taking it to the next level.
Got that. We've got about 10 minutes left, Nadeem. Let me just take a look at a couple of questions that people have come up with. Hasnain Ali mentioned recruitment trends specifically with big data, and I think there's two different parts. One is around measuring what has happened, and I think the other one is measuring what has happened, combining that with the data of people, how they perform in the organization, and start bringing the data of how people perform in the organization into the recruitment process, so that when you do assessments, whether it's gamified or anything else, whether you do assessment, you can then actually pinpoint with a lot of accuracy which individuals will be able to be assessed. I think a second trend that you're certainly seeing is in terms of the social media usage and how social media usage of candidates is being used in the recruitment process, and I think there's a lot of elements there. And one thing certainly as a candidate, you now really have to be very much aware to whatever you publish on the internet. Doesn't matter whether it's a Facebook picture of your graduation party 16 years ago, is still being used to get an impression of you of how you've been seen. Let me take another question. I'm gonna come back on the future of HR, and I know that is something that is very close to your heart, Nadeem. So I'll come back to that. There's a question here by Samia around for psychological behavioral assessment. How do the inherent biases are reduced? Is there a gold standard to measure performance? I think just the second part of that. If there was a gold standard, Samia, then I think I would be very rich at the moment. So unfortunately, that gold standard is still very elusive. But obviously, there are opportunities to reduce biases through behavioral assessment. One part is around the validation, of course, of the test to see whether the outcome is similar across different age groups, across different genders, across different socioeconomic strata, and at the same time, I don't know whether you are able to have focused in terms of the algorithms that are being used or being built in order to make assessment. There was this case with Amazon recently where these algorithms had an inherent bias towards men, wasn't that, Nadeem?
Yes, that's true.
What was the situation again?
So what happened was very recently we which I will be covering at the end as well, that a lot of automation, because it's been created by us, I would say man, not a woman, by all of us, and we inherently have bias, and we've mentioned that in the future work, where we say that you need to be very cautious of automation and the bias that it brings, because it's been developed by human beings themselves. So if there is a biasness in the back, there's a biasness that comes out through the automation, through the variety of ways that we're trying to basically capture performance as such, whether it's recruitment or other places.
Kinza just asked a question. How can we create a business case for predictive analytics, Nadeem? How can we get executive buy-in?
I think the first, I did mention this, and I'll mention it again, is that the first thing to understand is start off with a business question. What HR people do is I know I'm criticized for saying this, but we're mostly found in our silos. And we're looking at HR data. So the first part of the book where the reason why I ask people to actually read it is because we're taking people from not just using HR data. When we're only using HR data, we're very confined to the HRMS systems. When we start using workforce or people data, we look at systems from marketing, we look at systems from operations. That's why I gave you the example of Brompton, where they're looking at data which is not HR data. Solely HR data, and linking it to the key performance indicators, which links back to the financial performance of the company. So once you start with a business question, okay, so the business has this many orders. Do they have the requisite amount of people to be delivering that order? So that's where recruitment comes in. That's where then when you hire the right people, whether they're performing properly or not. So it's all starting from the right question, and then being able to collect those data points that are necessary to answer those questions. The reason why we don't have a buy-in is because we don't ask the right business question.
I think that's a great point. It always starts. For my general belief in running HR has been always our ability to combine business insights with people insights.
Yes,
and yes. That's where we as an HR profession adds value.
Yes.
So it's always asking the business question and then see how with people insights you can sort the business issue.
We've also, what we've done is looked at the capacity or the competencies that are required for HR to upskill themselves in commercial orientation, which is again some of the work that we've looked at, which Dave and I have looked at. Is so what are the key competencies that HR need to gear themselves up for the future of work? And commercial orientation is at the top. So you need to understand the language of the business. You need to understand finance. You need to understand You need to be more organizational savvy, look outside the business, not just inside the business. So I think that is very important for me to kind of pinpoint and I would say, be very clear on the onset.
Got that. A couple of questions specifically around gamification and data required for hiring best candidates. So Sharmeen asked, the data which company receives as a result of recruitment gaming, is it auto-administered and manipulated manually? Let me be very clear that Sharmeen, all the data, assessment data, is being presented to companies in the manner that the candidates have scored. There's no way to manipulate the data. Of course, at the end of the day, companies decide on the basis of the score as well as other information to invite for an interview. But there's no way that they can manipulate the assessment data. Then Maas asked the question, what type of data is required for hiring a best fit? Any views from you, Nadeem? What type of data is required for hiring a best fit?
I would say so. A best fit basically depends on the organizational need. It could be different for X and it could be different for Y. So I think this question is again, it depends. That would be my answer. It's not. If it was so easy, we could just
money.
Yeah, I think it comes back to one of the things that I've said. I made a video on this and it went really viral. And I said, your CV is only 5% of your personality, and it can only show that much. And people, we had lots of comments on it. And I think that's where companies that are providing gamification and other, as you said, you're looking at other data points from LinkedIn to all social media, and that is becoming part of the recruitment process. And people never used to believe me when I used to say that, and it is happening now because it's possible.
But I think there's a process to the madness, correct? So if you look at what is the best fit, you first have to define what is success for an organization. Secondly, what are the capabilities that are required to have success, both on the hard side as well as on the soft side. Then that defines into who are people that are making the biggest contribution in the organization and what kind of profile do they have, both in terms of experience as well as in terms of personality and cultural fit. Then you try to understand skills and the competencies that are required to it. What is the aptitude that is required to it? And then do you design a selection test in order to assess that? That is the backward way of identifying what is the best fit. As a result, you therefore have to look at the data points that are here in order to measure that on the front end. Correct?
And I think every point needs to be measured or assessed or evaluated in a specific need of that best fit. So you can't have a general rule of thumb. It all depends, as you said, this is a process, but it all depends on the organizational need per se.
Two more questions. One by Usman, who says, the continuous evolution of technologies, how do you predict the role of recruitment specialist? I think it depends a little bit of where you start. Most recruitment specialists that I know are at the moment, 80% of their time is operational administrative. So they basically are managing the process instead of adding the value in the right fit. So depends a bit where you start. Where the future, in my view, and I would love to hear your perspective as well, where I think the recruitment specialist is going to be probably the most or second most important function within the HR function, because at the end of the day, the raw material that you bring in is going to be the starting point for success. Correct? So for me, getting the right people in, and if you ask any CEO in any survey that they ask about their challenges, they always talk about the quality of getting the right quality of the team in. So for me, recruitment is number one. So the role of the recruitment specialist is all about, again, it's about really understanding that business, really understanding what defines success for the person, for the vacancy that you're looking for. And then and then bringing that back to the criteria that you set and looking. And then secondly, so therefore it's very much around that analytical part. The second part is all about your ability face to face to convince the millennials of this world that this is the most important and best role that would fit for them. And the third part is then this whole technology piece to make sure that the whole admin side, the pre-selection, the assessment side, the applicant tracking system, the responding to queries, the candidate relationship manager is all being done through chatbots, technology, gamified assessment, etc., etc. So I think there are going to be three different components: analytical part, a interpersonal part, and then your technology part.
Yes.
Anything that I missed?
No. You've probably hit the hit it at the right spot. We've covered that. It is the competencies, the technology, and obviously the culture that you bring, that you create in the organization. So it's exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, let's end up. We started with Corona, so let's still end up with Corona. One question: how does the coronavirus impact HR practices, and how will it evolve? What is your view in terms of how is the HR world going to change differently, BC and AC, before Corona and after Corona?
So what has happened is a lot of organizations are now starting to kind of understand the importance of their workforce, as you said, and how important they are. I basically, when I start off my workshops, the first thing that I tell my people is where is the business value gone, and that's gone into the intangibles, and the intangibles are basically the human capital. So coming back to what you said, your people are basically the material resource that you need, considering the technology, because you need to have the people that can actually use that technology. So I think that people weren't prepared for this. It's basically created what we've if I were to talk about the future of the work, we talk about a systems level disruption, an evolution that has taken place, and this disruption has basically been caused on a multitude level, where it's a global level disruption that has happened, and companies weren't ready for it. We've been shouting about it. How do you create a lot of bigger companies like Cisco? They're already an example is their teams have already been agile. They've went into agile work and agile designs. So you wouldn't see a hierarchy per se, but you're going to see an organizational network analysis that they're doing. So that has already happened. So a lot of the companies actually haven't gone out of the business, but I think per se SMEs and obviously medium-sized companies have basically felt a lot of the problem to basically move into technology. So that is probably that is a problem that we're facing globally at this point in time, because a lot of people, they don't know how to work from home. So I think companies need to. Sorry.
No. I just wanted to end. If you finished, I just ended, Nadeem.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes. Need to upskill their workforce accordingly.
Yeah, in my personal view, of course, there's three huge changes four big changes gonna happen. One is around socially, one is around economically, third one is around technology, and the fourth one is around data privacy and tracking. And the big state that is slowly emerging has been accepted. I think the key is going to be on the technology side, is that we're going to see significantly more virtual processes, whether it's through working from home, whether it's by completing HR processes completely virtually, and as a result add value there. So I think as a result, over the next couple of years, we're really going to see an impact in terms of step change in terms of digitizing HR processes.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I think we overrun by about 5 minutes. So thank you very much, Nadeem. That was fantastically insightful.
I think
for sharing.
I think you're right when you talk about what the impact of the coronavirus. I'm all in, and the future of work will be very different. Automation will be taking lead, and all the HR practices, as you said, will not just HR practices. I mean, the organizational practices will change, and how they're going to be impacting. With obviously, we've written a lot on it, but it depends on organizations how they embrace this change. It's all about adapting to this new technology rather than repelling it. So that's just my final conclusion. You need to start adapting to it, and this is a high time because this will just continue. It's not going to abate tomorrow or the day after. So I think organizations really need to embrace the change rather than repel from it. So that's again. That's why we're here.
I think there's not going to be back to normal anymore. I think that's certainly a conclusion. There's no back to normal.
This is the new normal.
It's a step change going forward, and you either are creating that step change or you're going to lag behind that step change. Thank you very much, Nadeem. That was extremely insightful. I wish you a great Friday. Our viewers, thank you very much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here. Stay safe. Use this moment to reflect and learn, and also stay sane. Goodbye.
Thank you.